Welcome viewers. Today we will be discussing in continuation to the last class. Last class we have concluded by saying that how Nyaya treats knowledge under the epistemological purview. Now this class we will be discussing that how Nyaya considers the knowledge under the metaphysical perspectives. We will be discussing Nyaya's view, and after that we will be saying that knowledge are of which types, and when you say that the types of knowledge, what do you mean it? What is the presentative cognition, what is the representative cognition, what is valid cognition, what is invalid cognition. So all these things today we will be discussing. Again I am saying, just to remind you further what we have discussed in the last class in a one line, that last class we said that according to Nyaya, knowledge stands out in relation to some object. If you say that knowledge, it means that your knowledge relates to some of the objects in the empirical world. Therefore, Nyaya are a realist. Now in the metaphysical perspective, the question asks that whether knowledge is a relation or not, whether knowledge is a substance or not, whether knowledge is an attribute or not, whether knowledge is a mode or an activity. So all these questions attempted by Nyaya, and one after another they have given the explanation that whether knowledge can be a mode or activity, whether knowledge can be a relation or not, whether knowledge can be a substance or an attribute. The first, they said that knowledge is an activity because it is activity of mind. If mind is not alert, if you are not in a conscious state, whatever you cognize, you cannot cognize the object properly. You cannot even cognize the object with all its features. Therefore, knowledge is an activity, it is a mental activity, because it is the mind who take the responsible for cognizing the object as it is, and also later recapitulate the object if it is encountered in that kind of object in future. Therefore, it is a mental activity when you cognize an object. Therefore, they said that it is a mental activity. Further, they said that when you say that mental activity, knowledge cannot be attained just having the passive mind. What they mean is that knowledge is not a reflection of objects of the mind which receives them passively like a mirror or reflector. He is saying that if you say that knowledge is a mental activity, then mind should be active, mind should be alert, mind should be conscious. It is not the case that mind will be like a mirror, and once the mind have a contact with the object and the mind can able to cognize that object. It is not so. Like in a mirror, if you stand in front of a mirror, your face can be immediately reflected. Therefore, they are saying that do not consider mind as a mirror. That means whenever there is an object presented before the mind, mind will cognize that object. Therefore, they submit that mind is an active mind when you are alert, when you are aware, when you are conscious. Then if mind relates contact with the object, then only mind receives the knowledge about that object. So therefore, you find that the active mind is responsible for cognizing an object. Therefore, they said that it is a process in which the mind actively reaches out to objects and illuminates them. If the mind is passive, the knowledge that we gain cannot be considered as a valid knowledge. Before moving to the second question, whether knowledge is a relation or not, there are few points that you must know. That there is a scholar known as Alexander, who is a realist. He said that knowledge is a mental act, and for him every experience may be analyzed into two distinct elements and their relation to one another, namely the act of mind or awareness and the object of which we are aware, and that one is an ing form and the other an ed form. What Alexander mean here is that he is saying that when mind actively contact with that object, this is in the process to cognize the object. Once mind received that object in a full form, then he or she cognized that object. That means one is the process involving for cognizing the object, and the second one after cognition of the object. Therefore, he put in a grammatical form. One is ing form, which is in a very continuous, another is ed form, which is means after cognition. That means you have already cognized that object. In this case, Nyaya put a counter argument by saying that Alexander tried to confuse with the grammatical prejudice of the notion cognition and cognized. Further, they said that by stating the act of theory of knowledge is a grammatical prejudice and excludes knowledge from the category of action. What they said, that Alexander, whatever way of explaining the process and the product, that means the process where the mind is relating to the object and after that cognizing that object, this process and product, Nyaya rejects it and said that the act of theory of knowledge is grammatical prejudice, and further said by doing so, by putting this thing in a grammatical prejudice manner, it excludes knowledge from the category of action, because according to Nyaya, what is the nature of this activity? They said that if mind is an active and relate to the object and cognize that object, if this is so, what is the nature of activity? The mind really act here with all alertness, but what is the nature of activity? So there they said that the nature of activity cannot be a physical activity like motion or like movement. Further, they said that it neither can be a physical activity nor can be a mental activity, because at all if you consider the knowledge is a mental activity, then the whole question still remains that any activity happens in the mind is not very true or valid. What Nyaya said, that it cannot, the knowledge cannot be any kind of physical activity like motion and force. The existence of any activity in the mind or consciousness is highly questionable fact. That means the first reject the physical ground. They said that this cognition, the knowledge, you cannot consider as a physical activity like force or motion. However, you cannot even consider as a mental activity, because the existence of any activity in the mind, because we cannot see what is happening in our mind while cognizing an object. Therefore, they claim that any activity happening in our mind while cognizing an object is highly questionable fact. Therefore, Nyaya refute the first statement or the first question, saying that knowledge cannot be an activity. Further said that, further they attempt to answer the question whether knowledge is a relation or not. They say that it is the subject and object when they relates with each other or the connects with each other, then the knowledge emerges. That means the subject, the cognizer, able to cognize the object which is supposed to be cognized. That means in one hand there is a cognizer and another hand there is a cognition, and the third step there is a process where cognizer able to cognize the object. He is saying that here subject and object involved for emerging knowledge. However, knowledge itself is not a relation. So in this ground, Nyaya rejects that knowledge cannot be a relation. The third question remains, and Nyaya attempts that third question, saying that as our physical qualities perceived by our sense organs, in the similar way knowledge can be perceived by our mind as the special sense organs. Here Nyaya very clearly mentioned, they say that as our sense organs involved for cognizing an external object, for cognizing an object and its external qualities or accidental qualities, in the same way mind is a special sense organs. However, they never said it is an sixth sense organs or is an internal sense organs. They said mind is a special sense organs, can cognize the knowledge. However, here knowledge cannot be the quality of mind, because it is through mind the cognition of knowledge is possible. Therefore, knowledge cannot be the quality of mind. Then question arises that now Nyaya is claiming that knowledge can be a quality because it is known through the mind. Like we know many things through our sense experiences, and we know the things because of their qualities. Therefore, they are saying that it is through mind we know there is a knowledge. However, the knowledge cannot be a quality of mind. Then question arises, whose quality is this? If knowledge cannot be a quality of mind, is it a quality of body, or is it a quality of sense organs, or is it a quality of something other than this? The first, the clearly rejected, knowledge cannot be a quality of mind. Then the question arises, can knowledge be a quality of body? Then there they says that body is subject to burn and subject to death, subject to start and subject to end. That means body perishes after some time, but the knowledge remains as it is. Therefore, knowledge cannot be the quality of body, because once body dies, then knowledge is supposed to be died if the knowledge will be a quality of the body. So therefore, they say that knowledge cannot be the quality of body. Further, they said knowledge cannot be the quality of our sense organs even, because different sense organs involved differently for cognizing an object. Then how this quality will be responsible, or how this quality will be attached in different sense organs differently for cognizing the different objects. Therefore, the same quality cannot be found in a different form. They reject the question by saying that knowledge cannot be the quality of sense organs. Therefore, they submit that knowledge is the quality of a soul. They explain that knowledge is the quality of immaterial and conscious substance known as soul. That means they define soul as an immaterial and conscious substance, because first they say that whenever you talk about a knowledge, whenever we talk or discuss about a knowledge, it relates to an object. It stands out for an object. So therefore, they say that soul is a substance of immaterial and conscious, where knowledge remains. Therefore, they say that knowledge is a quality of the substance soul, and soul for them is an immaterial and consciousness. Further, they said knowledge appears as a result of the relation between the soul and the object, the soul and the body. They explain it clearly. They said that we need 5 components to have a knowledge of an object. The first is that we need a soul, then soul relates to the mind, then mind relates to the body, then body relates to the sense organs, and the sense organs relates to the object for cognizing that object. And all this process involved in all the times for cognizing an object. Therefore, knowledge emerges. Therefore, we the human beings say that we attain knowledge, or we accumulate knowledge, or we achieve knowledge. What happens? The soul relates to the mind, and mind connects to the body, and body has a sense organs, and sense organs contact to the object. As a result, again it is a reverse form, try to analyze the features of the object, and henceforth cognizing the object in its full form. In this way, we the human beings cognize the object. So this is the way Nyaya treats knowledge under the metaphysical perspectives. Now we will see classification of knowledge and how they classify knowledge. For them, knowledge are of 2 types. One is anubhava, that is presentative cognition. What they mean is a presentative means when an object is presented before the cognizer, and the cognizer is able to cognize that object, it is a presentable. Therefore, they say that it is a anubhava. A cognizer can cognize an object which is presented before him or her. In this case, they said that this is a presentative in nature. Further, they said that there are representative cognition also there. That means it is a smriti or memory. That means we are able to recapitulate what we had experienced, say, sometimes back or some years back. or some decades back. If we could able to recapitulate it in its original form in the same way that we had seen or experienced in the past, then we find that all these experiences relate to the reality or relate to the phenomenal world, and henceforth our cognition will be a valid one. I repeat, according to Nyaya, there are two types of cognition. One is presentative, another is representative. The presentative, where the cognition or the cognized object is presented before the cognizer, and the second one is a representative cognition, where it is because of our mind we are able to recapitulate some of the memory of the past events in the way we had experienced in the past. If we can able to do that, then both presentative and representative knowledge will be a valid one. Therefore, they said that the objects are directly presented in case of anubhava, whereas the objects are indirectly recalled in smriti. However, they strongly claim that all knowledge may not be treated as valid knowledge, because we find that many times or many of the situations where we cognize the object where our cognition is not a valid one. Mistakenly we cognize rope as a snake, however it is a cognition. Therefore, Nyaya said that though we cognize many things, however all cognition cannot be valid cognition. Therefore, they said that valid knowledge is known as yathartha and invalid knowledge is called ayathartha. And now we will see how they explain these are the terms. Valid presentative knowledge. Presentative knowledge is anubhava, that means the object is presented before the cognizer, and if the cognizer is able to cognize that object in its full form, it is a valid presentative knowledge, it is known as prama. But there are many situations where the object is presented before the cognizer and the cognizer not able to cognize the real nature of the object in its full form. Therefore, here we find it is a presentative in nature, but not the valid cognition. Therefore, they say that invalid presentative knowledge is known as aprama. A knowledge is valid only when there is the right apprehension of object or yathartha anubhava. If you see that yathartha anubhava, now you mix these two terms. Yathartha means a valid knowledge, anubhava means which is presentational, the presentative knowledge. The first one is valid and presentative. Then the individual or cognizer can have apprehension to that object. And if this is so, you say that your knowledge about that object is a valid one, or say prama. So therefore, they say that prama is the valid presentative knowledge and aprama is the invalid, however it is a presentative knowledge. Now further they said, to a valid knowledge one must correspond to the reality of the objects, because Nyaya is a realist, because anything can be explained is explained through logically and also correct thoughts, and also able to cognize. Whenever we cognize the object in the empirical world, it should be very concrete. We should cognize the object in its full form. Therefore, they said, to have a valid knowledge, one must correspond to the reality. That means the object should find in the reality. A valid knowledge is the manifestation of object as it is. If you identify a glass of water as a glass of water without any further identification, then your knowledge will be the valid knowledge, and that valid knowledge is the manifestation of the object, because it manifests the glass of water. Further they said knowledge is presentational character but not valid. That I have already said. How is yathartha anubhava? That means the object is presented before the cognizer and the cognizer not able to cognize the object with some or other barriers. Therefore, the knowledge that he or she generates on that object is known as yathartha anubhava. That means it is a presentational character but not valid. Now, if this is so, something is presented before us and we could not able to cognize that object, and henceforth our knowledge about that object cannot be considered as valid, and therefore Nyaya say that if this kind of knowledge one accumulates, it is called as aproma or invalid knowledge. And under aproma they said there are three types of knowledge. One is doubt, another is error, the third one is tarka or hypothetical arguments. People also said tarka means hypothetical reasoning. Now we will be discussing what happens when somebody is in doubt and how doubt arises, and when somebody doubts whether cognition occur in concrete form or not, what happened in case of error, and how tarka will be considered under the aproma. Now first we will be talking about the doubt. Doubt is an indecisible cognition. That means the object will be presented before the cognizer, and cognizer will be in a dilemma to cognize that object because the cognizer not able to identify all the features of that object. Henceforth, it is the cognizer identify the object some other form where the object is not. It is the oscillation of mind between certain positions. That means the two things have the same features and the cognizer not able to cognize that object in a concrete form, cannot give a particular name of that object. Therefore, he is in a dilemma. The cognizer is unable to decide about the content of the cognition. There are four arguments. As a result, doubt arises. As I said that doubt arises because the cognizer not able to identify the objects in its fullest form, because in his or her mind some other content involved. Therefore, he or she is in a dilemma to identify that object with a particular name. Henceforth, the knowledge about that object is not a valid one. Now, what happens in case of a doubt? Something is presented before the cognizer. Some object is presented before the cognizer. The second step, cognizer is not able to decide the cognition because certain alternatives are equally forcing the cognizer to cognize the object. Whenever the cognizer tries to cognize that object, certain other forces, alternative forces, imposing him or her to cognize that object differently with a different name. As a result, he finds in the form of interrogation. When certain alternatives are equally forcing the cognizer to cognize that object, it is resulted in the form of interrogation. For example, whenever a cognizer able to cognize a rope which is lying before him or her, in that time he or she finds that the same kind of features he finds in a snake. Therefore, he or she is confusing whether that object is a rope or a snake, because the feature of rope and the feature of snake more or less similar and many times overlapping with each other. Therefore, the cognizer not able to cognize the object because of the oscillation of mind for taking a particular situation, that how really to cognize that object when both the contents are overlapping with each other, and as a result the doubt arises. Here you can see that there is a presentational knowledge, but the knowledge is not valid. Therefore, the doubt comes under aproma according to Nyaya. I have given an example. The snake and the rope are alike. As a result, we are in a position of doubt to cognize the object. Now, doubt arises because of 5 reasons. Doubt is based on the common properties. I said, what is the common properties? There are few common properties you find snake as well as with rope. Therefore, the cognizer not able to take a decision whether that object which is lying before him or her can be called a rope or a snake. It is because of the common properties. Because of the common properties, signingness, we many times confuse that whether the object is a shell or a silver, though it will be presentative in its nature, though it will be lying before us. So, because of common property also doubt arises. Sometimes because of peculiar qualities of an object, also doubt arises. For example, if you take the quality sound which you hear, right? If you take the quality sound, now sound cannot be the quality of the substance, say eternal substance, neither can be a quality of non-eternal substance. I repeat, sound as a quality cannot comes from the eternal substance nor from the non-eternal substance. Eternal substance like soul, spirit, God, and non-eternal substance like chair, table, pen, etc. So therefore, being the peculiar qualities of the ether or akasa, it is really causes the doubt that where sounds comes from and which quality is this and what is the substance where we find sound as a quality. So in this case also the cognizer not able to cognize from which substance the sound comes from. So therefore there is a doubt, and hence though it is a presentative, though we can hear the sounds, but still we cannot make out from which substance it comes from. Therefore we are in a doubt. The third point we have mentioned here is that doubt is based on the conflicting testimony. Doubt also arises because of the conflicting testimony. Different people given different opinion on a particular issue. As a result, the cognizer is not able to decide about the cognition. Take an example. Let's take Upanishads. Different Upanishads, say Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, Taittiriya Upanishad, Isa Upanishad, Chandogya Upanishad, there are so many Upanishads, right? Different Upanishads has a different opinion on the concept Atman. If this is so, then the cognizer or the human being cannot able to describe or identify what is the true nature of Atman and who is the Atman. So here doubt arises. The fourth step, it said doubt also is based on irregularity of perceptions. That means lack of uniformity. You do not find the same thing in all the places. For example, if there is a water in a tank, you can identify. Water in a pond, you can identify. But if you see in a long distance, there is a mirage, you think that this may be the water or this may be the mirage, because whenever you think about the water, the concept mirage or the attribute of the mirage comes to your mind, and whenever you think of the mirage, the attribute of the water comes to your mind. Therefore you are in a dilemma to claim about that object, to identify that object with its true nature. It just happens because of the lack of uniformity. The fifth point that I said, the doubt is based on the irregularity of non-perception. What we mean here is that, what Nyaya rather means here is that there are many things exist, but we cannot perceive that. For example, every tree survives because of there is a water in the root, but we cannot see whether water exists in the root of a tree or not. What we see only is the root. Here it is the lack of non-uniformity of the nature, because whenever a tree grows, we need to pour the water in the root. That means water is the basic element the root needed for the survival of the tree. But however, in this case we could not cognize the water in the root which is there in the soil, but still we infer that there may be the cases water is there, therefore the tree survives. Therefore you can find the green leaves in the tree. Henceforth, in this situation, though the human being, though the cognizer not able to cognize the object, the water in the root, still in a dilemma saying that whether water exists in that or not, because if water does not exist, then the tree cannot survive, and if at all water exists, then it cannot be seen. In this case it is a dilemma arises in the case of a cognizer. Cognizer not able to take a particular decision while cognizing that object. The cognizer are not sure to cognize that object with a particular name, because the two alternative features equally forcing him to cognize an object different with different name. As a result, the cognizer not able to cognize that object, and in this way doubt arises. Henceforth, doubt are presentational in nature, but it is invalid. Further we will see error. What happens in error? Error is the inverse of valid knowledge. In case of error, an object is cognized as having certain characteristics those really fall outside of its being, and all error is subjective. What they mean is that in case of an error, you cognize an object and you found that the features by the which you cognize that object which are not there with this object, these features are found in some other places with some other object, and this is the situation where error lies. For example, now you cognize a rope as a snake by attributing all the features of the snake to the rope. Now later you find that, oh, this is not a rope, because you know that the features that you have imposed on that object on the rope, and as a result you cognize a snake which is not a correct one. So therefore, in case of error, what happens? We cognize an object with certain features, and later we say that, oh my god, these are features are not found in that object. As a result, the object may not be named as so and so, it has a different name. In the case of rope and snake, you find that the attribute of a snake you imposed on the object rope, and henceforth you cognize that object as a snake, and later you rectify. This is your error because you cognize a rope as a snake. What happens here? That because you know the attributes of the snake, and somehow the object rope appears similar to the snake, you impose all the quality or attribute of a snake on the rope. As a result, you are in a confusion state, or you cognize that object wrongly. So therefore, all error are subjective, because in case of error, the cognizer already cognized the object with some name, but in case of doubt, the cognizer not able to even a correct name of that cognition, because he is in a dilemma to cognize the object with this name or that name. So therefore, all error are subjective, because it is because of the cognizer, he or she cognizes the object differently because he or she attributed some of this quality of an object which is not there in front of him or her. However, he or she imposes those qualities on that object which is presented before him or her. So this is all about the error, and if you see that in error also, it is presentational in character. The object is presented before the cognizer, and in addition to that, the cognizer fails to cognize the object as it is. So therefore, error also comes under aproma as a invalid knowledge. Now tarka is the last. Tarka or hypothetical arguments, people say even hypothetical reasoning. Now we will see that how tarka can comes under aproma or invalid knowledge. Here saying that it is a presentational in nature, but it is invalid, because tarka is an argument, is a type of implicative argument by which we may test the validity of the conclusion of any argument. Whenever there is an argument, we try to validate whether the argument is valid or not. We see whether the conclusion is supported to the given premise or not. In this case, the question arises here, because in an argument we find few propositions and the conclusion is derived based on the propositions taken together. Here the question arises whether any contradiction would follow if the given conclusion is accepted as true or rejected as false. I am putting the question further. The question arises in case of argument that whether any contradiction would follow if the given conclusion is accepted as true or rejected as false. That means if you accept it as true and you find that with your acceptation that you accepted the conclusion is true, in the same time you find there is a contradiction in the argument, then the argument is invalid. But if you claim that, if you reject the conclusion as a false and you find there is a contradiction in the argument, then you simply claim that the argument must have been valid. If you would not have been reject the conclusion as a false, the argument have been valid. So therefore, all things are presented before the cognizer, but the cognizer not able to really identify whether the conclusion is valid or not. He is saying that if you accept the conclusion is true or conclusion is valid and you found that there is a contradiction in the argument, then the whole argument will be invalid. But if you reject the conclusion as a false and found contradiction in the argument, then the whole argument must have been valid. So, this is the way they put doubt as a sangshay, error as a viparya, and tarka as a hypothetical arguments. These three components comes under aprama or invalid knowledge. Now, further question arises in case of smruti. The smruti is a representational knowledge, right? I said that knowledge are of two types. One is anubhava, which is presentative in nature, and another is representative in nature, which is known as shruti. In case of shruti, we are able to recapitulate the information which we had experienced in the previously, or which we had known in earlier time. So, therefore, they are saying that if you could able to recapitulate all the information that you had in the past in a particular order with a sequence, and it relates to the empirical world, or it relates to the phenomenon of the empirical world, then smruti knowledge or smruti is a cognition will be a valid one. But whatever knowledge, if you could not able to retrieve it or recapitulate it in a logical sequence way, and the way that you had experienced earlier, then that knowledge cannot be considered as a valid knowledge. So, therefore, they said that it is basically a memory which find in the soul. As a result, we could able to recapitulate some of the information. What Nyaya strongly claims is that whenever you experience some of the objects, some of the events, or some of the phenomena, you realize the true nature of the object and having the impression of that object, and the impression is imprinted in your mind. And whenever you interact with the same kind of object in the future, the mind recapitulate all the information or the impression that it had in the previous. Therefore, I have written here that memory is knowledge due to one's own past. In case of memory, we retrieve the past experiences in the form of image or ideas in the same form as it was experienced in the past on a particular time. And after that, I said the past experiences is due to the impression of objects, and it is retained in the soul. There are three things here in case of memory. Memory helps you to recapitulate the information. Now, here what Nyaya is saying, that whatever you had information that was in the impression form accumulated in your mind, the past experience is due to the impression of the object, and it retained in the soul. And when mind comes into contact with such type of objects in a later period, there is a remembrance of the corresponding original experiences. So, basically they are making a relation between soul and mind. The first point they are saying that, please remember, the first point they said that in case of smruti, it is a representational cognition or a representational knowledge. In smruti, what happened? Whatever the impression we had earlier, we had in the past, it was accumulated, or it was stored in the form of impression in the soul. And mind has an interaction with that soul. Once the mind in the later period finds the same kind of object or counteract the same kind of object, then take the information from the soul and try to relate that object, and hence the mind could able to gather all the information which it was stored earlier in the soul in the form of impressions. So, therefore, there is a relation between mind and soul. The knowledge we had in earlier, it was stored in the soul, then mind has a link with the soul. When mind interact with the same kind of object in the future, then mind has a relation with the soul, and mind able to take all the impression which is stored in the soul. So, in this way smruti or memory works, and as a result you find that if this kind of link follow, then mind able to recapitulate all the information that in the same form that could have accumulated previously or in the past. So, basically there is a game between mind and soul here, or the knowledge that is stored in the soul, how the mind relates to the soul and take all the information and able to recapitulate the same information with its same sequence. So, this is the way Nyaya said that if this is the way memory functions, or memory able to recapitulate the information, then memory can be considered as a valid cognition, though it is a representational in nature. Then people claim, if this is so, then what about dreams? Yeah, memory is being considered as a cognition tool because of the permanence of soul. Here you can identify that Nyaya clearly said that soul is permanence, because for them soul is immaterial and also consciousness, full consciousness. So memory is functioning, is being considered as a cognition tool because of the permanence of soul. The soul remains permanently, though body dies. Thus memory is such type of knowledge which arises solely out of the impression of previous experiences and pertains in the permanent soul. Now memory is divided into two forms. As I said, yathartha, true, or ayathartha is false. What is true? The memory will be true if and only if. Now you can see IFF, I have said in a short form and with italic, that stands for if and only if. The memory will be true if and only if it has some valid presentation and it is an agreement with the real nature of the remembered objects. Otherwise it is known as ayathartha or false. What they are saying? Whatever knowledge you had in the past, if by the help of memory, if you could able to recapitulate the same impressions with the same sequential order, with the same logical argument that you had seen or experienced earlier, and it relates to the phenomenal world, then this knowledge, this smruti is true, or this cognition is true. But if you fail to recapitulate the information the way you had experienced earlier, then the cognition will be false. So therefore the false cognition is known as ayathartha and the true cognition is known as yathartha, though these are representational in nature. Further they said that it is due to bhava or bhavana. It is due to bhava or bhavana one can remember anything with a particular name. Further, through bhavana and bhava one can remember anything with a particular name. That means when you have a bhava, that means there is an emotion you attached. Soul has a component emotion. You emotionally attach to the object and identify the object with its true nature in its fullest form. Bhava is emotion, and bhavana, you realize the object in its fullest form. If you can do that, you can remember that object for a longer time. The impression of the object stored in the soul for a longer time. That means you can able to recapitulate the same information which you had encountered in the past, if you realize that object in that time through your bhava and bhavana. Therefore they are saying that bhava and bhavana is also equally important for recognizing an object, for identifying an object, or cognizing an object in its true form with all its features. If you can do so, then memory can able to recapitulate all the information that was accumulated in the form of impression and stored in the soul. Hence memory also plays a role for retrieving all the information that you had in the past. When memory encounters this same kind of object or same sorts of object in later period, also can able to recapitulate the information that yes, in the past you had also the same kind of experiences. So basically it is a chain from memory to soul, and memory helps to recapitulate all the information which is stored in the soul by seeing there is an object presented before him or her while encountering an object in the future. It is a representational, because never is presented before the cognizer. It is the cognizer who is able to recapitulate what has happened in the past and try to retrieve it in its correct form. So therefore the knowledge here is a representational, it is not presentational. It is a representational in one hand, and also it is valid, because whatever you present as it is, the way you had experienced in the past, and it is also a logical sequence follow, and it relates to the phenomenal world or relates with the objects, facts, or events of the phenomenal world. And if this is so, then the memory knowledge is a valid cognition. it is a representational in nature, however it is called proma. Now if this is so, people claim that what about dream? People also had a dream in the night and also in the morning time they are able to recapitulate some of the dreams. So do you also consider dream, the knowledge, will be a valid knowledge? So now let us see how Nyaya reacts to the concept dream as having the retrieval of knowledge. As in dream also we are able to recapitulate some of the messages that we had seen in the last night. However, whether we will consider the dream as a valid knowledge or not, now let us discuss. Dreams are considered as a memory cognition, there is no doubt of it, but it is not a true memory cognition. It is not yathartha because it is a false memory cognition according to Nyaya philosophy. It is ayathartha, that means it is a representational nature, but we could not able to recapitulate all the information in a sequential way or in a logical way in the same way we had experienced in our dream, because in many parts of our dream we forget when we wake up, and as a result we could not able to speak all the sequential dream what we had seen in the last night. So therefore they are saying that it is a memory cognition, dream is a memory cognition, but however this is not a valid cognition because we are not sure what we had seen the last night, and as a result we could not able to present it in a sequential way. But if you see in case of smruti or memory, we could able to recapitulate all the information in the same order as we had experienced in the past. Therefore they said that dreams are intrinsically false memory, it is not true in character. Further they say we are in dream due to the imperceptible influences of our past desire and action. What is saying that? Many people have many desire to do in their life, and many people also tries to do many actions in their life, try to engage themselves to achieve many more things. However, due to some or other reason they could not do it. As a result, the way they had planned to do things, the same way it comes in the dream, because it is due to your so much ambitious and anxietiness, something appears in your dream because that is not fulfilled in the empirical world, and this is the cause where we all people had a dream in the night, and all dreams are not true or yathatha because the way you have seen it, it is not a particular order. Sometimes you see there is a tiger chasing and immediately you find that there is a moon, and immediately you find that there is a sunrise, and immediately found someone is moving with his or her bike. So therefore there is a not sequentially or causally chain from one to another step by step. Henceforth they said that dream is a memory cognition, but it is not representational in its true nature, and we people had a dream because there is an unseen force works behind that. And what is that unseen force? The unseen force is nothing but we had an anxiety desire which is beyond our purview, which could not be solved, which cannot be resolved in our day-to-day activities in the empirical world. Therefore the same things which we had imagined, it was stored in the impression form and we had seen this night. Therefore memory is a valid cognition, where dream is not a true cognition. They said that it is a false memory cognition, dream is a false memory cognition. Now this is the graph that I am showing you so that you can understand what Nyaya mean. Nyaya discuss about knowledge under the epistemological ground and metaphysical perspectives. Knowledge is known as buddhi. Then they said that knowledge are of two types, one is presentational cognition or anubhava, another is representational cognition. Presentational cognition means where the object is presented before the cognizer, and henceforth the cognizer able to cognize the object in its true form. So therefore in case of anubhava you find it is a valid knowledge and invalid knowledge. Invalid knowledge because it is a presentational, the object is presented before the cognizer, but the cognizer not able to cognize the object due to some or other reason. Therefore they said that under invalid or aprama we find doubt, error and tarka or hypothetical arguments. But in case of valid knowledge we find perception, inference, comparison and verbal testimony or shabda. What they mean is that whenever we cognize an object in its true nature, we need the sources through which we cognize an object. One is perception, another is inference, third one is comparison, and fourth one is verbal testimony. That will be comes under validity. Now the left side, if you see, smriti is a representational cognition. That means nothing is presented before the cognizer. The cognizer is able to recollect the information what he or she had in the past, and if his or her recollection in a particular order as it was experienced earlier, then it is a true memory or yathartha. If he or she does not able to recapitulate the information in its correct form, then the knowledge of memory, though it is a representational, it will be known as false memory or ayathartha. So this is the way you understand that how now in a realistic perspective expresses their view on the concept knowledge or jnana. Thank you.